College football nerds here talking Big 12 championship game, Kansas State versus TCU. And these two teams have already played once this year, but this one is only a 2-point spread for TCU. And we're going to get into that. I got Josh here with me. He's going to get nerdy. And I've got one piece of homework for you. Give me your score prediction in the comments. And if you like this video, like and subscribe. It does help us out. Every YouTuber on YouTube says it, but it really does help us out if you do both of those things. All right, Josh, there's been this narrative that I think is fair that TCU's played and benefited from playing a lot of backup quarterbacks this year. I think it's a totally fair thing to comment on. These are things that happened. But in the Kansas State game, it's a little more interesting than that because what people are going to say on the surface is, well, Kansas State's quarterback went down. Adrian Martinez got hurt after the first drive or during the first drive. And TCU got to play the backup the whole way through, beat him by 10 points, but they benefited from that. There's an argument to be made that Kansas State is better with Will Howard at quarterback. And for those that maybe aren't Big 12 fans, we've got people in SEC country and Big 10 country. They may not know that. So illuminate us a little bit on that possibility.
It's interesting to break down where Kansas State's at, and there's sort of eye test and reality. Martinez has always been a splash player, but he's always been something of an inconsistent one. And even at Kansas State, his performances have been very up and down. People were very high on him to start the year, but it was mainly his legs more than anything. I mean, against Missouri, 5.1 yards per attempt. Against Tulane, 4.8. Oklahoma in a win. Should say they lost that Tulane game 10-17. In a win against a bad defense, he was still only 6.9 yards per attempt. Texas Tech, 6.1 yards per attempt. There have been a lot of bad passing performances, and what happened is that he goes down in the TCU game. Howard comes in for relief, and from then, they're 10.1 yards per in the TCU game. Oklahoma State, they're 8 yards per. Texas, it was mainly Martinez, 9.1 per. He comes back in relief against Baylor. Doesn't have a great day, that one, 6.3 yards per. But then he's 10.9 against West Virginia, 10.1 against Kansas. A lot of good outings there. And in games where he started front to back, he's pretty consistently good. Pretty consistently good every one of those games. The other factor I would say you would think would be the run game and whether it fell off. And I will say maybe, arguably, a bit. Didn't run the ball great against West Virginia. Ran it well enough, 5.5 yards a carry. Against Kansas, but I will say they've had hiccups earlier in the season. 3.4 against Iowa State, 4.4 against Tulane. When I go back and look at it, Oklahoma State game, 5.4 yards per carry. I don't really see a strong indication that the run game fell off that much without Martinez, and it's a little weird because you got to balance run and pass and the way college does those stats. But the long and short of it is, it seems like they're throwing the ball a little bit better. And it seems like they're running the ball about the same. So there's a pretty good argument that Kansas State's actually been a better team since Howard took over. And especially the last couple weeks, he's had a lot of time to get rhythm, to get a groove. That offense has gotten more effective. And I don't know that it was a negative even in the first game against TCU, because he did play pretty well in that game. But certainly now that he's had several starts under his belt, I don't know that Kansas State is an actually more dangerous team with Martinez on the bench than when he was the starter.
Yeah, and then the other argument would be, well, he went down in that game, so he didn't get the first-team reps. And I think that is a valid argument as well, because when a guy has to come in cold, it can be tough. But in that game, and this is another one that I think that this is a plus for both teams. In my mind, I agree with you. I think they're better offensively with Howard, but also this means that these two teams, the first game wasn't some huge, thing that was slanted in favor for TCU, because if you look at it, Kansas State didn't score on their opening drive. Howard comes in, second drive, right down the field, touchdown. But the big thing for me is when a backup quarterback comes in and it really affects the team in a negative way, what you see is maybe a lot of short fields, maybe some pick sixes, some fumbles, a lot of disconnected stuff from the offense. And in this game, when they played earlier, that wasn't the case. The average drive length for TCU in a scoring drive was 67 yards, which is super long. They had a 91-yarder, they had a 65-yarder, 70-yarder, 77-yarder. So it's not like he was screwing up, giving them short fields and giving them easy points. which leads me into the next thing I want you to talk about. A lot of people don't know because they haven't been watching TCU enough and they're just dismissing them as having an easy schedule. A lot of people don't know how good this TCU offense is, legitimately good, in a way that even against, if they've played poor competition, even against poor competition, they're setting themselves above the rest in a way that needs to be noticed. Speaking of championship week, we got a championship clothing line, Bird Dogs. It's sponsoring the College Football Nerds for 2022, and I'm going to talk about shorts because I work from home, so I don't have to wear pants that much. I do wear Bird Dogs pants when I go travel for work, which is rare. I'm going to do a little product demo, but not like Josh who gave you all the booty. I'm just showing you the pants or the shorts so I can show you this liner. I can show you how good they look. And Josh, I love the shorts. I work out in them all the time. I wear them. I honestly, I know this is silly. I sleep in them. I work in them. I work out in them. Multiple pairs. And Bird Dog sent us some product, just full disclosure, but the joke's on them. I already had a bunch of Bird Dog stuff. But you're president business. You're an attorney. So you have to wear pants. It's kind of a requirement when you go into the office. So talk about Bird Dogs in the pants department.
Well, you say that, I normally don't wear pants, but Bird Dogs have been so comfortable that I can't help but wear them, and I'm wearing them, right now. So yeah, they're comfy. They've got pants that are professional slacks. They've got joggers. Kind of wearing the joggers right now, chilling behind the camera, and I mean it's hard to fault them. They're cheaper than Lululemon. I think they're just as good quality, and they fit well for men. So it's definitely been a good product.
So go to birddogs.com, enter promo code NERDS. Used to be CFB Nerds, but NERDS, and that's 2 Ds, birddogs.com. They'll throw in a free Bird Dogs rope hat. That's birddogs.com, promo code NERDS, and boom, free Bird Dogs rope hat with your pair of Bird Dogs. The most comfortable shorts, pants, and sweatpants with built-in liners. You will not want to take these things off. I promise you.
Yeah, and there's a lot of pieces to that, but it's a very experienced receiving core. They've got a really, really good back in Miller. But if you go down and look at Johnston, you look at Barber, you look at Davis, just a lot of guys that have been very effective at receiving the football. They are explosive guys. They've got height on that team. They've got elite speed on that team. Duggan has been very effective and efficient at quarterback. It's just a good offense. It's a really, really good offense. And when you look at them statistically, like you look at the passing game, they had one bad outing against Texas. And Texas's defense, we've talked about this a lot, kind of gives people fits off and on because they've got a ton of talent on that team. And when they feel like playing well, they can play really, really well. It's just kind of sporadic. But outside that one, they've been effective passing the ball every week, really. And I will say what's really come around for them, and we talk about the offense and how good they are. And, I don't know what more to say other than they're modern. They run the RPO. They're explosive. They've got explosive threats. They can make catches in traffic. They can take plays and run them to the distance. The thing that's impressed me the most, though, has really been the defensive turnaround. 3 of the last 4 weeks, they've held teams to under 5 yards per attempt. That is hard to do. Texas was included in that, Iowa State and Texas Tech. They gave up some yardage to Baylor, but they didn't throw the ball that much. And off and on, they've been either really, really good against the pass or really not great. And lately, it's been more very, very good than not great. And so TCU, yeah, I mean, it's an offense that's been consistently very high level with 1 or 2 minor hiccups, which always happens. And then a defense that has more often than not been very good, but maybe a little more sporadic. So when you're trying to pick this game, I think a part of the conversation really is, what do you think you're going to get out of Kansas State? And what do you think you're going to get out of TCU in terms of Kansas State's offense versus TCU's defense? Because I think TCU is going to score. That's the consistent thing. We want to make sure we say that. But the question really is, are you going to get Jekyll or Hyde on either side of that offensive-defensive matchup? Because I think that really determines whether or not you have a very competitive game or one that TCU can win by a decent margin.
I think you just either intentionally or unintentionally gave me the cue to give you the segue cue into the computer model. I want to remind everybody that's watching, this game, I think, opened up about a 1 point. I think TCU was laying 1 point, got bought to 2, which is not a huge swing. 2-point favorite for TCU. Tell us what the model's got, and we'll go from there.
Q to a Q to a Q. Yeah. So our model is a relational model. We look at the teams, how you did against your opponents, how good your opponents were, how they did against everyone else. Trying to get sort of an idea of what the performance is going to be in this game for each team versus each other and their relative strengths or weaknesses. And then we look at your past performances each team, and then we build a scoring model unique to each team, and we kind of plug in the results from the game into that model to figure out what the score is going to look like. Not just like points per play, a little more complicated than that. And one of the intermediate statistics we generate is this percentage of opponent averages allowed. And what that means is your opponents allow, if your opponents are gaining 5 yards of carry and you allow 4, you're allowing 80% of their average. Just, again, an opponent-adjusted way to really say how good or bad a defense is. And the defenses are very similar here. TCU is 96% against the run, 94% against the pass. Kansas State, 94% against the run, 88% against the pass. I usually say anything 90 or above is just mediocre because you've got games like Colorado or G5 teams thrown in there, Tulane, and you're typically going to be better against Tulane than Tulane was against their G5 competition. So the really only thing that stands out here is that Kansas State's pass defense is pretty good. It's hard to hold teams below their passing averages. We always see that number a lot closer to 100 than the run number, especially with good defenses. 88's reasonably good. I mean, it's a reasonably competent pass defense, and I would say that's really the one reasonably competent defensive unit in our statistical metrics that's in this game. So when you factor that in, you kind of see both teams mostly just sort of having their offense as you would expect. TCU comes out to about 6.2 yards per play. Kansas State comes out to around 6 yards per play. And that differential, as small as it is in yardage, leads to a pretty small differential in points, 28 to 24, TCU over Kansas State. I'll say that it's actually less than 4 points. It's closer to 3.5 in our model if you want to get down to decimal points. So yeah, right there with Vegas, thinking this is around a 50 to 55 point game, thinking Kansas State is probably about 3.5 points worse than TCU.
And I'm going to give my score. I think this is more than a 50-point game. I think this is going to be a wild game. I think that Kansas State has absolutely nothing to lose, nothing at all. If they lose this game, if they win this game, like obviously winning, a conference title is a big deal, but they're going to play with nothing to lose in a way that I could see TCU playing a little tight. And we've been on Miller as a running back for TCU all year. I think he's great, but Deuce Vaughn is a dude. I mean, he really is, and we haven't given him enough due, I don't think, even in this chat. But I've got this one, Kansas State 34, TCU 37, still winning. But if Kansas State wins this game, I'm not shocked in any way. Tell me what you got.
Yeah, I'm going to go 34-31 TCU. Pretty similar observations. It won't shock me at all if Kansas State wins. It won't shock me if TCU blows them out. I really do think the highly variable point here is probably Kansas State's offense versus TCU's defense. I think TCU is going to get to the 30s offensively. I think they probably have a hard time getting to the 40s offensively. And Kansas State's got a lot of points to score to beat them. To get into that mid-30 range, get into the 40 range is tough. But it's possible with Kansas State. So I don't quite know how that's going to go. It's just going to depend on how they play that day. Look, we don't pretend that we can guess how every game's going to go by looking at a computer model and making projections, but we can just kind of tell you where the game is. Again, our model, we consider it a baseline that we work off of, and this is a great example why. I think this game's going to really come down for execution in Kansas State in their passing game. I mean, run and pass, but the passing game is going to be the driver of how effective that offense is. And however well that turns out, it's going to determine whether Kansas State has a shot to win and or wins this game, or whether TCU can lock it up and be undefeated. But yeah, I am with you. I think it's more likely than not that TCU pulls this out and ends up undefeated and in the playoff.
Josh low-key just told y'all it was really a clap back to the haters that love to tell us in the comments, the game's not played on paper, y'all. The game's not played in a computer. There's more to this game than data. Y'all, the data that we look at or that we use, they're just talking points. We watch more football than anybody. And that's where our predictions come from. And we're not perfect on them for sure. But, like, we're using this data to supplement what we see with our eyeballs, that we supplement when we look at schemes and matchups. We don't just predict based on what somebody's yards per attempt is. All right, y'all, that's it for us. Let us know in the comments what you think the score is going to be, and we will get down there and tell you why you were wrong or why you were right. It just depends on if you agree with us or not. Thanks so much, y'all. Have a great week, and God bless.